Okay, hi Hans. Nice to see you. Thank you very much for taking some time to talk this morning.
Pleasure.
And we were going to talk today about, you suggested something around how we get internationalization out of its success box. So I'm interested to talk first of all about where you think it has been successful. But also I know you've been doing lots of traveling in different parts of the world, and maybe we could talk about how you see internationalization developing in maybe Latin America and in Russia. I know you've been working as well, thinking perhaps in terms of curriculum and strategy, those kinds of things. But because you and I have written about the globalization of internationalization on a number of occasions, and I'm interested to hear where you think it's got to in more recent times. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Yeah. So where do you think, in what respects do you think internationalization has been successful, and what do you mean by the success box?
Well, what I mean by the success box is that a lot of institutions are having done over the years very much to make international part of their strategy, and have been very successful in developing international offices that do sometimes very limited things, but sometimes also very broad range of activities. And so success in that sense is a relative success, because it depends indeed what you mean with internationalization, and so is it successful. But what I've seen, for instance, in the case of one institution in Mexico, the UDEM, the Universidad de Monterrey, is a private Catholic university, which has had a leader, Thomas Butrun, for I think over 25 years as the director of the international office. They are very successful in study abroad. They send their students in study abroad. They are very successful in collaborative online international learning. They have been identifying also the intercultural competences for the students who have been on study abroad. They do a lot of exchange programs, have a lot of active partnerships, etc. So you could say, in that sense, they have done, in a broad sense, very successful internationalization. And if I look at another university, which I'm in the advisory board, RUDEN, the People's Friendship University in Russia, which was already during the Soviet Union time the most international university of the Soviet Union, because they got a lot of students from all over the world with scholarships for all kinds of political, ideological reasons to come to RUDEN. After the fall of the Soviet Union, that fell apart, but they were able to revive that by still focusing very much on, we are an international university. So they still have a large international student population. They have a lot of partnerships abroad. They do a lot of language training in the Russian language and culture training abroad. They try to develop dual degree programs. So also, to a certain extent, they are successful. But the problem with that is, if you talk to the people, is that success is limited, because it's on the one hand a success also that the leadership of the institutions are very much saying, oh, we do great, and they promote how international they are, etc. But they leave it in the international office.
Okay.
And it stays there, and to get that out of it is a risk, because then you lose that kind of connection. So, and that makes it difficult to go one next step further to make international more mainstream, to really also have the different schools having their own strategies, how to internationalize the curriculum, how to make it much more comprehensive in all aspects of the university, HR and finance, etc. Because as soon as you step out that comfort box of your international office, then you don't know if you still have the support of your leader in the international office, if the environment of local issues is not dominating so much that you cannot get enough attention to the international one. So that is a little bit the challenge that I see.
So I guess you mean it's getting the balance right between having appropriate leadership for internationalization, which isn't going to disappear because if you take it out of the international office, then there's nobody leading it, taking it forward, for example. But also making sure that people are on board with it. Because I know another thing about UDEM. I don't know if you spoke to them about it. They have these semester focus on different countries in the world. And what they've tried to do is get it across the curriculum. So Thomas told me about this some time ago, where they, or say, for example, they take France, and they try and introduce that country's culture and history and society and politics or whatever into all of the different subjects across the curriculum. So I know what you're saying about it. This is one of the issues, isn't it, around leadership generally?
Yeah,
Sure.
and that example is a good example, and we discussed about it. In itself, that's very nice, but it stays one moment. And so it doesn't really change the curriculum in international. You give one shot of an input of a country or a region, and that's in itself important, and you hope that something of that sustains itself, but that sustainability is the big challenge.
Yeah.
To make it really that you have an internationalized curriculum is not happening from an international office. We always have said that has to go out of the international office and has to go to the schools and the program developers and the deans, etc. But to make that step is a very difficult step. And that is the danger of leaving your comfort zone. So when I was speaking to the people who are working on internationalizing curriculum and intercultural competence and partnerships and COIL, etc., they all said, well, we have reached our limit. We do very well, and everybody says, what is your problem? You're doing very well. And they see that there are limits to what they are doing, that it really doesn't change fundamentally the global engagement of the institution. It stays like marginal to a certain extent. And marginal is maybe not the right word, because it's more than marginal as we define it in general, but still it is not comprehensive, it is not embedded into everything. And
see that happen then. Is there a way that people could move it out of the international office with an approach which is going to work and be successful? Is comprehensive internationalization possible?
Well, it's a good question, but if you don't try at least to do it, then it stays in that sense marginal, relatively marginal. So how to do it is indeed a big question, and that's what we have to try to see. Well, what are good mechanisms to make that next step? And one of the ways could be that you say, well, of course, we cannot put out the people who are working in international office in other offices or in schools directly, because then you break out the comfort zone. But what you could do is create more kind of account manager structure. So people stay in the international office, but also have a role in the HR office, have a role in the different schools, and try to work directly with them to make the next step. And that will take time. As we always have said, comprehensive internationalization curriculum is not by big steps at once. You have to do it very gradually. But we have to identify what are the right steps to make to get out of your comfort zone and to the next level and to make it more mainstream. And that's something that is, I think, a very important new dimension that we have to make. Because there are a lot of universities, I mean, we mentioned now the one in Russia and in Mexico, but there are many universities also in the developing world that are relatively successful, but face exactly the same kind of problem. That they're doing it very well, and everybody is even applauding them and says, well, what is your problem? You're doing very well, and we are very proud of you, and the rector is crazy about it. But it stays still in that box.
And as we've said, though, each institutional context is going to be different. So it'll be partly to do with the local culture, identities, the nature of the society and politics. So there isn't really a single answer that's going to be the right solution for everybody, is there?
No, that applies to everything we do. Contexts are so important to keep in mind, but even then you can still look into what are potential mechanisms to make the next step. and try to identify a list of next steps so that people have a kind of guideline more than a kind of fixed structure with guidelines of, you can think about maybe doing this, you can think about doing that, and then apply it to your context, what is feasible or not. And it might be that in some contexts and some situations, like for instance now with the current crisis, that you should be happy with what you have and not try to make the next step because you know it's not possible. The conditions are not there and people have other things on their mind, etc. And then you have to say, okay, we have to accept this is the maximum at the moment we can accomplish, and we should be proud of that. But if there is a better condition in the future, we should try to make again the next step. But we have to be clear and about that. That's my main point.
Yeah. So in a way, it's partly about dispersed leadership, making sure that there's leadership for internationalization in different parts of the institution. But that's working against the way most institutions work, which is kind of silos, isn't it? So not only the academic schools or faculties or whatever that will have their own kind of disciplines and ways of working, but the silos within the administration as well. So, you know, you'll have finance, you'll have international, you'll have student support, student affairs or whatever, and they all have their own little zones of effectiveness, and they tend not to work across. And it's that kind of cross-university working that we need to look at, really, isn't it, in dealing with this?
And that's the big chance. We have to try to do that, but it's not always possible. I mean, because institutions indeed have not really change agents. They stick to what they do, and they want to use classical patterns instead of innovative change patterns to make things different. And so it takes a lot of time to do that. And you can try to do it bottom up, which is necessary, and I think at the end more effective, but you need also to have leadership support from top down to make that happen. And I see that, I mean, another example, I'm really involved in quality assurance issues for the European University Initiative, where you see a little bit of the same kind of challenge. The universities have been internationally active. Now suddenly there's money to go one big step further, but they have no idea. They of course, they present ambitious plans and how to make the silos breaking away within the institutions and between the institutions, but it's so complicated that at the end you can wonder if it will work, because there is not so much money related to that. There's not so much involvement, engagement of stakeholders within the institutions, because it has been a very fast and top-down approach. So I'm afraid there also people fall back on the more traditional systems. Okay, we send students abroad. And then you get even their ambitious plans, like we want to have all of our students having an international experience without knowing exactly what that means.
Yeah.
So,
and they don't focus on the outcomes, as we've said. But so I know you're aware that I've written about integrated internationalization as we talk about it, and I've got this kind of student-centered orientation, as you know. But as a result of that, people sometimes say to me, "Well, give us an example of a really." An institution that is really successful in terms of comprehensive internationalization or integrated internationalization. And I've never been able to give, and I mean, I think there are, as you've described today, that some pockets of success and good things happening. You can give examples of good things happening, but at the moment it seems to be a kind of a pipe dream in a way, or something that we should all be aspiring to, but nobody's really got there yet.
No, of course, I get that question all the time. So give me a good example of a perfect comprehensive institution. First of all, I don't think there is something like that, because as we always say, it's a process, and it's an evolving process, and always changes, and contexts are changing. So you cannot define it like there is the perfect international university. So you have to be realistic that there are examples where institutions are doing a good pathway into a direction of comprehensive internationalization. But it is indeed that next step is from going from a successful international operation to really a comprehensive internationalization is a very complicated one and not possible. I mean, to go back to the UDEM case, where they have been very successful in defining the impact of study abroad on intercultural competences. They have a lot of interesting data, etc., about that. But the step to say, well, to the institution, it only becomes effective if we try to do that also with the students who don't go abroad. So really to assess also the students that are in the curriculum and see how we can internationalize the curriculum to create more intercultural competence. That step is not possible, because then the university says, well, that's too complicated. That's not also your role in the international office, so stay out of that. Yeah. So that's a clear example how difficult it is to make it happen. And the same with partnerships. They have a lot of partnerships, but all the partnerships are on exchange of students and sometimes exchange of faculty. But joint research or joint dual degree programs, etc., that you cannot do from out of the international office. That has to be done somewhere else. And to make that step, then also they face the limitations of their success within the box. Yeah. So and I think that's not only UDEM, but that I see that in many other institutions I have been. To make that step is the most complicated one for institutions to do. And you need to have indeed a very strong leadership commitment to force that. I mean, in Florida, International University of Florida, University of California, Davis, there are some efforts trying to do that as well, but they also face the same kind of challenges. Not easy to make the next step.
Well, that's really interesting, Hans. Thanks very much for talking to me today about this. And I can feel another article coming on somewhere, but look forward to working with you in future.
Yeah, well, no, for sure, we will do that.
Thanks, Hans.
Okay.